Hey girl, Marissa here. You are listening to the Codependent Dummy podcast. As a young woman, you have been raised, reinforced, and rewarded for putting the needs of others above your own. Now, in your 20s, you're finding yourself exhausted, exasperated, and enveloped in shit relationships, especially the one you have with yourself. Codependency is a way of being where we put the feelings, wants, and needs of others above our own in an unconscious attempt to meet our own feelings, wants, and needs. Sorry to break it to you, sis, but that is not sustainable. This podcast is to help you undo all that so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. Let's get to it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Codependent podcast. Today, Dr. Rima Bonario is back. She had an episode that aired with us on January 9th, which focused on feminine sovereignty. And in that interview, Rima and I, we talked about codependency in the bedroom, and both sensed we needed an entire episode to unpack that. So she's back. And just as a reminder, Rima, if you haven't listened to that episode, I encourage you to do so. And Dr. Rima is a dream weaver, soul coach, and wild heart healer who helps women experience personal wholeness, relationship harmony, and material abundance in their lives. So Rima, glad to have you back.
Thank you so much, Marissa. I'm really excited to be here and to be talking about this important topic.
Yeah. So, what does codependency look like in the bedroom?
Well, if you recall in our first conversation, we talked about this idea of other referencing as a way to help us identify if we're in codependent behavior. Other referencing just means that we're using our relationship with others and our beliefs about what we think they're thinking, what we think they want, as the organizing principle for how we structure our day, our time, our thoughts about ourselves. And so we are referencing other people and the things that we imagine they want far more than we reference ourselves.
Right.
And when we're talking about how this shows up in the bedroom, it works the same way, except that one of the things that we're abandoning in a much more palpable way is our own body and our own body's response.
Mm.
And so the stakes are a bit higher when we are self-referencing in the bedroom, because we're creating something that's not authentic and that is not sustainable, because it doesn't serve us in the long run. And so we think we're doing all the things right. Although probably there's some niggling idea that this isn't really how it's supposed to be, but we're just really not sure what else to do or how else to create it.
Right. Can you say more about abandoning our own body and our own body's response?
So when we're in a moment of sexual intimacy, ideally both partners are relaxed and turned on and connected. And it takes a lot longer for a woman's body to get to that state.
Mm.
And because we live in a culture where pornography is ubiquitous, and most of us, men and women, but particularly, of course, men, have seen pornography and maybe even used it on a semi-regular or regular basis, and have grown up with these images as what a sexual encounter is supposed to look like, we don't have any understanding of what actually happens inside a woman's body for real. We see in those clips the last stages of a sexual encounter, and those, that's a professional industry, And the women in that industry are off camera getting all the things they need in order for their bodies to get in a receptive state. Otherwise, they couldn't really be in that kind of experience in a positive way. And most of the people in that arena understand how their bodies work because it's their job.
Right.
And we as the viewers just look at that and see, oh, this is easy for them. This is, like a little bit of kissing, a little bit of petting, and everybody's ready to go. And, when we're young or we're in the first blush of relationship, sometimes it really can be that easy. It's not that it can't be that easy, but certainly as we age and also as relationships stabilize and we move out of that initial hot burning, attraction time,
Right.
polarity settles. And if we're not actively working on the polarity, even if we are, our bodies take longer to respond. It usually takes between 30 and 45 minutes for the female body to be properly prepared for a multi-orgasmic response.
Mm-hmm.
And that's our birthright. As women, the upside of taking so long, if you will, it's not even so long, but needing that amount of runway is that we can experience multiple orgasms from, there's many different kinds of orgasms, and we get to have a lot of fun when our bodies are really in the right place for that.
Mm-hmm.
We have as much or actually more erectile tissue than a man does. It's just that ours is on the inside of our body.
Mm-hmm.
And so most of us don't know anything about our own biology and how it operates. And so we get in the bedroom and we think we're supposed to have some kissing and, whatever, a little bit of petting, and then we're ready for penetration. And then often what happens is sex is painful.
Mm-hmm.
And then we ignore that pain because we think, well, it's not supposed to be painful. And if it's painful, there's something wrong with me. And I don't really want to tell him that it's painful because I don't want his feelings to be hurt. And I don't want to, it just like it's the whole thing. It's like a whole thing.
Right.
And so we abandon our bodies by tolerating painful sex, unfulfilling sex, not pleasurable sex, because we think we're supposed to. And
Mm-hmm.
in the long run, we hurt our own bodies and we hurt our relationships and we hurt our capacity for true sexual intimacy because we're living a lie.
Mm-hmm.
And we're living that lie because we're worried more about how someone else is going to think about us and judge us and perceive us than we are about taking care of ourselves. And
Right.
that's how codependency really destroys our happiness in the bedroom.
Right. And then adding to that, the other referencing, we are afraid of how we'll be perceived negatively, but then we're also thinking, okay, they evidently are enjoying this. They need to continue to enjoy this. They need sexual pleasure. And that is the utmost priority right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is the thing that happens for us when we slip into codependency in the bedroom. We become hyper focused on the masculine experience. And
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just going to say this can happen in same-sex relationships as well, right? But primarily in the world we live in, we have a social construct and agreement, whether we agreed to it or not, which most of us didn't, that says that the male experience is the primary experience and everything else, the white male experience is the male experience, and everything else is sort of a one-off from that. It's an adaptation or um, a secondary experience. And part of what's happening when we're in codependency is that we are identifying our sense of self and what pleases us with what pleases other people. And there's nothing wrong with being pleased for others when good things happen to them. And especially if you're particularly empathetic, you can get a lot of pleasure out of your partner's pleasure. But when it's so one-sided, that's when it stops being functional and starts becoming unhealthy.
Right.
And so we begin to judge our success in the bedroom by the male ejaculation. So if our partner ejaculates, it was good. right? We get to check the box and say that was successful.
Mm-hmm.
And there is so much more to the sexual experience, to intimacy and creating an intimate bond through sexual experience that is beyond and outside of or in addition to orgasm, whether it's a female orgasm or a male orgasm. And
Mm-hmm.
and so we've created this sort of goal orientation when we get into the bedroom and we think, okay, my job here is to make sure he comes. And if he comes, and will all be worth it, and he'll feel good about me, and I can feel good about me.
Right.
And this is not sustainable. It's not sustainable because eventually resentment will build up, frustration will build up, sadness will build up. And if part of our codependency is that we have relationship addiction as well, where we're seeking that sort of high from the encounter, we're more likely gonna be prone to having that chemistry appear outside of the relationship. And then because we use that as a way to help us access our healthy sexuality, we can get drawn into affairs or intrigues or even leave our relationship because we think, well, this one's broken now. It doesn't work right.
Mm.
If it worked, I wouldn't be having this experience. Oh, look, here's this guy I feel all hot and bothered about again. So this is it. This must be the one. And I just made a mistake before.
Right.
And so
Okay.
we really are confusing that early moment of cathecting and anxiety, and that feels like excitement and that intrigue with love, which isn't really real love, actually.
Mm-mm. Okay, I want to tie back into this, potential for, right, being ungratified, so seeking gratification elsewhere. That's a potential consequence of, codependency in the bedroom. Before we continue, Rima, I'm curious. I mean, as you're talking, I'm nodding my head, and one like significant relationship in my early 20s, I don't think I orgasmed. I mean, maybe once, but I'm having a hard time even recalling that vividly. And yeah, it was all about him. And I was available. I was available all the time, whenever he wanted. And I don't even know if I faked it, because for both him and I, the bar was him finishing. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there was a part of me that feared, if I'm not available, if I do reject him, then he will not be satisfied, and thus I will risk being abandoned or rejected. So yeah, I've definitely experienced this in my relationships. Do you have a codependent experience in the bedroom that you can share with us?
Oh God, my whole early life, that was what it was all about. I mean, I didn't understand. I didn't know how to differentiate any of these things. And
Mm.
even in my current marriage, we've been married 20 years, and I would say it wasn't until I began studying sacred sexuality and understanding my own sexual sovereignty and the idea that I could have sexual pleasure just for my own gratification that I even considered that. And that was probably, I guess I probably started that journey about 8 or 10 years ago.
Mm.
And in my early life, it was really just about doing the things that were supposed to be done, that was expected. When we were first married, first together, there was a lot of sexual chemistry, so that was easy. And then we were making a baby, and that was easy for me too. And
Mm.
then something changed in my body, and I did not understand what was going on. So after the baby was born, suddenly now it became more, I wasn't, my body just wasn't operating the way it did before. I didn't have a lot of sexual desire. And I don't remember exactly what occurred, but over time, it slowly started to become less and less. And I was waking up spiritually as well. And I wanted a different kind of experience in the bedroom. I wanted more
Mm.
emotional connection. I wanted it to feel like a soul date, not just genitals having a good time.
Mm.
And so I just kind of remembered feeling, I started to feel this anger, in the experience. I just would have this anger, and my husband would touch my breasts, and suddenly I was just all this anger. And I discovered later that as far as the places where our emotions lodge themselves in our body, is that anger can show up in the nipples. And so I was like,
Mm.
whoa, who knew? And so it was a whole adventure. And I began not having sex when I didn't want to, which was a big step forward. I would,
Huge.
huge, right? To just be able to say, no, I'm not available tonight, or I'm not, it just like not, my body wasn't available, and I began listening to that. And
Mm.
so then it just sort of became infrequent and felt like a chore, unless we could have an experience of connecting first with a dialogue. And we made dates. We decided to, I used to try to drag everybody to church, and it was such a chore. So we quit going, and we made Sunday mornings our sacred time.
Mm.
And then that worked for quite a while. We would connect, with conversation and cuddling, and I would start to feel safe and available and turned on, and then we would have a beautiful experience. And so that was good for a while. And then my husband started doing his own work, and he began to be truthful and say how much that experience was not really working for him.
Mm.
And that all the talk would just kind of lead to there was no excitement there for him. And so eventually we found some tantric work and began studying tantra, and understanding polarity and sexual polarity. And once we really got a hold of that, we figured out what it was that was going on between us. And so when we were in this a lot of talking space, that's a feminine output, which is actually a masculine energy, and it requires the male counterpart to be in his feminine and open his heart to receive in. His heart is very much like our yoni, or our vaginal area, our vagina. It's the receptive part. And
Mm.
our chest is the part where things flow out, obviously. And so it was depolarizing, and he would lose his turn on, even though that's what I needed to feel safe. So we've had a lot of opportunities to try different things, to practice more body-based techniques.
Mm.
And so massage is a very good doorway for a lot of women into their bodies. This happens also because we spend a lot of time all day long doing, rushing, creating, acting, getting from here to here, running the errands. And after we've gotten out of that initial starstruck stage with our beloved, it's very difficult to transition from that very outputting energy into a soft, surrendered, open space.
Right.
And that's really where we have the most fun as a
Mm.
somebody who's in a female body, is that when we're soft, open, and surrendered, it doesn't mean we don't also get very active, and sometimes, are in the driver's seat. I mean, all that's wonderful to play around with those roles, but it works best when the polarity is such that the man is in his masculine energy and the woman is in her feminine energy. And you get that flow that moves between both bodies, and it
Mm.
it creates a more natural experience of connection, in the sense that the energy is flowing back and forth in a very beautiful way.
Right.
So you can think about it like sometimes when you get two ends of the same magnet pushing against each other. If you're in a heterosexual couple and you've got too much masculine energy in the space, it's not going to function as well. And so
Mm-mm.
a lot of us just pop out of our bodies. We talked about the starfish, right? We just leave our bodies and close our eyes and sort of hold on and say, okay, well, I can do this for 3, 5, 10, 15 minutes,
Yeah.
however long it takes. And that's, it's actually very damaging over time.
Right. Yeah. So I'm hearing for you in your journey, you started with not going to have sex when I don't want to.
That was the first big step. Yeah.
Huge, right? You listen to your body. And then you and your husband, you tried, right? Experiments like more dates for dialogue, sacred time on Sundays, conversation, cuddling. You're loving this and you're in it. You're cultivating a interdependency in the bedroom. And so he was able to say, like, this is not resonating. And so it's like, oh, okay, back to the drawing board. And right, tantric work. How would you say, like, acknowledging the polarity?
Yeah, so becoming masterful at working with our own polarity, with the polarity in the relationship and the polarity inside of our own bodies. And I would say too that, very often you just want to be aware that if you're always doing it in exactly the same way, we do the same 4 things in the same place at the same time, generally speaking, that novelty is a very important element for most people's brains when it comes to finding their turn on. Sometimes trying different things, different places, different times, different rooms in the house, and there you can get resources to support you with this. There are date books that sometimes have little things that you might do. What we want to understand is that for women especially, we are, and really we need to teach this to our men. We're making love all the time. Foreplay is happening all the time. You want me to be available and hot and juicy and soft in the bedroom tonight? Well, it starts with telling me good morning and giving me a kiss and saying goodbye before you leave for work and sending me a text that you're thinking about me throughout the day and coming home and asking how you can help to create dinner or, picking up something. And so that as a woman, we're not like handling all the shit, right? And then suddenly having to go from being the, making money and making the bacon and, putting the food together and doing all the stuff into suddenly now we're supposed to be in sex kitten mode. And so there are some things that we need to educate our partners around and ourselves around related to having time to transition. Getting into the bathtub and drawing a bath and putting some beautiful music on and working with luscious scents and, maybe even gently stroking our own body for a little bit just to get our own energy body awakened and enlivened. And then massage is actually what we landed on in the early times of these transitions that really was a better way to create that runway for my body to get connected and involved that didn't take a lot of words. So my husband could still be in a very active space where he was just would give me a massage. And I had to teach him that I didn't need a therapeutic massage because while that felt great, it didn't get me turned on. I mean, I was in my body, but then I was like acknowledging all the aches and the pains.
You're like, ow, ow. Yeah.
Like,
oh, there's a knot.
Yes, that hurts so good. Yes, please do that. But that's not lover energy, right? So you have to be willing to experiment to see what do you like? What do you like? And sometimes the best place to do that is on your own, to actually spend some time touching your body and discovering, does it turn you on if you have a nice light touch? Usually longer strokes instead of short strokes have more sexual energy to them, and again, the kind of massage that's more about just stimulating the body's receptor sites we need to very often, for me, this was very true. And what I learned in my exploration is that it's true for many women that our pleasure receptor sites aren't really completely hooked up. And we have to teach our body to run the pleasure from our genitals and our breasts up to our brain, where we feel and receive and acknowledge that pleasure. And
Mm.
so it can take a long time, for example, for us to have feeling in our breasts when we're younger. Um, that can come over time, and we can help create that ourselves by giving ourselves times where we're in sacred pleasure activities, where we're
Mm.
getting to know what do I like, what works for me. And
Right.
then we have to educate our partners about that. And that is hard for the codependent woman, because it means she has to acknowledge herself as in the mix and believe she's worthy of pleasure, that she has a right to pleasure, and it's okay to ask for that.
Right.
And then there's all the tension around how we ask for that. So we can get into that too.
Well, yeah. Heading towards that, I am curious. Going back to that relationship in my early 20s, with some of the young women that I work with, two questions come up. So first, faking it, I would argue, is very common in codependence in the bedroom. And you talked about this earlier, how ultimately we, by prioritizing, that we're talking about mostly heterosexual relationships, prioritizing his pleasure, you said something like it's a lie, like
Yeah.
ultimately it's a lie.
Yeah.
Can you say more about that, like omitting orgasm or faking orgasm?
Yeah. So faking orgasm, if you're doing that right now, if you are faking orgasm, then really your first step is to stop that.
Mm.
As opposed to my first step, for whatever reason, I never went down that road. Um, um, Before you can stop having sex that you don't want, when you're in sex you are having, you want to be honest about the experience. And when you fake an orgasm, you're literally lying to your partner in that moment about your experience. And your partner is believing that, because usually they want to believe it and they can't really tell. They don't really know. It's really all about how you respond, right? So we put them in an untenable situation where they are expected to pleasure us and meet our needs without getting feedback as
Mm.
to what it is that actually creates that. Nobody can adjust or be successful without honest feedback. And so we need to create feedback rich environments in our relationships and in the bedroom. And that starts by having conscious conversation and creating a space where you're actually inviting your partner into experimentation, into a perspective that says, there's more that could happen here. And I'd like to I'd like to have the opportunity to experiment with that. And and so that you're priming them, and we learn some phrases, we learn some ways of supporting our men in being able to hear that feedback in what's a very vulnerable space for them.
Right.
and and so it's not that we stop caring about their experience, it's just that we get to care about ours also.
Mm.
And so it's useful to have a conversation outside of the bedroom first, to just sort of talk about, I've really discovered I've been doing this thing. I didn't realize I was doing it. I didn't realize how damaging it is to me and to the relationship overall. I don't want to end up disliking sex. I don't want to end up avoiding it. I don't want to end up feeling resentful. And and I really noticed that I've been tolerating pain
Mm.
And I'm just going to tell you that most of our partners, if they're good people, and hopefully they are, the
Right.
last thing they want is to believe that their pleasure is causing us pain. They don't, and so in the beginning it can be a bit rough, but my husband said, well, you need to tell me if it starts to.
Mm.
And we didn't understand things about like, I mean, I think younger generations are a little bit more with this, but the importance of having good lubrication, and a product that you really like and appreciate, and making sure that you're doing things. So in the tantric world, we learned about the beauty of coconut oil,
Mm.
and I like to get organic fractionated coconut oil because it doesn't have a scent, and it stays liquid. And then you can get a little crock pot and warm it up in a little mini crock pot. So now it's nice and warm. And now it becomes
Wow.
part of the ritual, of having this beautiful oil to use all over the body. And there's so much fun that comes with that. And then to use it when you need it for penetration so that it's more comfortable, and to, ask, let's get a little more oil when it's time for, you need a little more oil. And it just begins to make the experience more intentional and more pleasurable. You
Mm-hmm.
can do things like set the space with music and with candles, and beautiful sheets, and have your, if you have something special you might like to wear. These are all little rituals that we can do that begin to cue our body into the idea that, okay, we're getting ready for some intimacy now. And
Right.
that, along with knowing what kind of touch really turns us on, and helping ourselves get there and helping our partners get there, it can be a really beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm. As you're talking, the thought came, we talked about how foreplay can be all the time. It's happening all the time. I don't know why my mind went to, but in codependent relationships, in the bedroom and outside of the bedroom, there is a lot of omission. There is a lot of keeping our thoughts and feelings to ourselves. And yeah, pretending to be content or excited when we're not. So I don't know. I think there's shame around faking it. And also, it's just part of a pervasive pattern that for, oh, for up until we realize it's not sustainable has helped us. But yeah, you're just saying that it's overall necessary to acknowledge it, to share it, and then collaborate on how to address it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And you can do that. Again, you can purchase books sometimes that can help with that. If you have a good therapist where you feel safe beginning to divulge what's really been going on for you in the space of a therapeutic setting, that can be helpful. Um, it can be scary to broach the topic because, as you say, the things we've been doing have been working on some level. But, most of us know deep down this is just not good, right? It's not right. It doesn't feel good. We long for the time when we remember that spark, perhaps, or like I said, it can really put us in a position where um, we're more vulnerable to outside influence because we're not taking care of the relationship, and we're not taking care of ourselves inside the relationship. And the thing about codependency is that we are operating under the guise that our partner is somehow the source of all that we need to feel good about ourselves. And it's they hold it, they have it, and it's our job to get it from them. We got to get the acclamation, we've got to get the approval, we've got to get the love, we've got to get the touch, it's like we're on this mission all day long to try to pull something out of them. And you know what, ultimately that actually wears on our partner. It's really inviting them or requiring them to take care of us in a way that is not mature. We're asking them to be the font for us
right.
instead of recognizing that we have to help meet our own needs to the best of our ability, And then we can come together as a healthy, filled, empowered, and self-loving person, and then come into relationship with another hopefully empowered, filled, self-loving person, and together the two of us create something that's exponentially larger, rather than one of us feeling empty most of the time and the other one being expected to fill us up. It's actually really it ultimately drains our partner. And in the beginning, our partner might feel excited about this because they feel in control, they feel cherished. If we're, faking that in a particularly good way, maybe we do cherish them. We take care of things, but actually, ultimately, what we do is we start to turn them into little boys.
Mm-hmm.
So we simultaneously want them to be the daddy, and at the same time we want them to be our child. And so we do all the things. We pick up their underwear, and we, run all the errands, and we overgive. This is another form of how codependency can show up, and their responsibility in the relationship starts to recede, and it gets smaller and smaller. And ultimately, that ends up creating a scenario where they don't function as a truly inhabiting their masculine power and a true partner for you in the relationship. So this is how you can end up in that scenario where you're both deeply indebted to them, where you need their you need all that you want from them, and at the same time you're sort of trying to give in order to get that back. And we do that same thing in the bedroom. We give to get, and it doesn't end up working at all.
Right. And then we, like you shared, we don't want to have sex with a little boy.
No.
And we do start to look elsewhere, or we do start to get excited by a coworker or a family friend or an ex from high school.
Right.
Can you say more about?
Yeah. And it's because if we're still trained to find that hit outside of ourselves, if we're still operating in such a way that we need that affirmation to come from outside of ourselves, when it stops showing up inside our primary relationship, inside our love relationship, we're doomed to look for it somewhere else because we don't know that it sits in here. And then we just keep repeating the same thing over and over again. We can have serial relationships because the spark dies, and then there's some other little spark, and we don't realize what we're doing is we're chasing a high. It's just like being addicted to drugs. We're chasing the chemical cocktail of emotions that gets released in the body when there's this moment of attraction. We're chasing lust, we're chasing the spark, and very often it's not the person that we're infatuated with, it's the feeling. It's the feeling we get that we want more of. And we think that feeling is coming from that person. So here's a little secret about that. All that experience of excitement that we get when we're in partnership with another person is generated inside of our own bodies. That's what we call in the tantric world Shakti. It's life force energy or sexual energy. We call it sexual energy because it comes from our sex organs. However, it's used for much more than just sexual activity. I mean, that energy is what helps us feel alive. It helps keep us youthful. It helps our body physically be healthy. And so when you have a moment of exchanging a glance with a stranger where there's some kind of chemistry that happens, I mean, that happens for people. When we understand, oh look, that's my body enjoying him, and maybe it's my body enjoying him enjoying me, and I'm getting like this little pleasure kick off of that. It doesn't mean that I owe him anything. I don't owe him anything for that. My body is generating that. And I can use that bit of excitement to enliven my own body today and be upbeat and move more easily in my own body, and then take that energy home and put it into my own home if I'm single, and making my home beautiful, into a piece of art if I want to, into a beautiful bubble bath. I can take it into the bedroom with my partner. like my sense of feeling good about myself. You recognize that this is about me enjoying myself. And so it's me enjoying myself. I get to take all that excitement and sense of self-worth and self-acceptance and self-love into my relationship. But very often what happens is someone's nice to us, holds a door for us, flirts with us, tells us something nice that's complimentary, just a platonic friend. And if we're in that position where we thrive off of other people's input and we haven't learned how to give it to ourselves, that can feel so intoxicating in that moment. And we can find ourselves being drawn to, oh, I want more of that, instead of realizing, no, I get to generate this for myself. I can generate this for myself.
Right. Yeah. Paradigm shift in perspective. And yeah, I think also like you don't owe that person. Yeah, sometimes it's like, oh, they want me, now I must provide. And you're like, no, you can just enjoy the sensation and bring that into your day, into your relationship, into, I don't know, a Zumba class, and just use it. You don't have, you don't owe that person.
And because this is an American thing, I think it happens in other cultures too, but there's this, I think it goes back to sort of our puritanical roots. There's this idea that once you're married, somehow you're not supposed to feel any attraction for anyone else but your partner again. And if that's our subconscious or conscious belief, in order to be successful, we will have to shut down our sexuality, because it's not possible to spend 30, 40, 50 years with one person and never find yourself attracted to someone else. And so the French have a word that's frisson, which is just like this, I think of it like this little moment of this little frisson, this little rising of energy that comes up the spine, or maybe it's in the belly. And there's this idea that people have these moments passing between them all the time, and nobody is threatened by that, because there's no sense that spark is the definer of what makes a good relationship. And because we haven't closed down our own sexuality, we can actually continue to have that spark inside our primary relationship. So it's not threatening. But if we have to be careful when we depolarize inside our primary relationships. We become like roommates, right? So maybe we really love each other and we get along well, but we just don't have much sexual energy together. That can sometimes happen because we're afraid to allow ourselves to be sexual beings, out of fear that I might have this moment that passes between me and another person. And now as a codependent, I feel, oh crap, I have to act on that. So what does this mean? What is it telling me about my relationship? What is this telling me about? We make all these stories about it, instead of just saying, you are a being who has an animal body, who is occasionally going to meet people that seem interesting and exciting, that cause and create between the two people. Our body has this response, but it's ours. And we have sovereignty over that response. We do not need to act on that. And we do get to feel alive and beautiful and enjoy being complimented. It's changed my world, this stuff, because, I used to walk around, well, my early years, I had to go to Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous to stop the behavior of getting into relationship for the purpose of fulfilling my own sense of self-worth. So part of that was I didn't know how to use my sexual energy in a healthy way, so I put it all in boxes. And then when it was starting to damage my relationship, because my poor husband was like banging on the Tupperware box, please, can I have some of this sexual energy? And I was like, no, 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 no. I had to become more capable of being a sexual being in a committed relationship, and, being out in the world. And what really changed was when I fell in love with me and started working on my own practice as a woman and seeing myself as a sexual being and understanding that I could have sexual sovereignty, meaning my sexuality and sexual pleasure was something that could happen for me, that my partner could take part in, but it was for me. And then it became easy for me to actually inhabit my sexual energy in a positive, healthy way. So it wasn't overly spilling out on people and suddenly all my relationships have this sexual intrigue happening, or under available for myself and my partner. And so it became easy to inhabit my body, inhabit myself, and walk around. And when I noticed somebody noticing me, holding the door for me, you know, lingering eye contact, whatever it might be. And some people even, speaking a compliment instead of like, when, sort of wanting to shrink away and, oh, not looking at people in the eye. I have become very able to just be grateful and receive it and enjoy receiving that. And and a beautiful thing happens that the person who's giving it gets received, but my boundaries are super clear, my energy is really clear, that I'm not available for anything beyond this what's happening here, to just receive your compliment,
Right.
and and that just creates a kind of luscious and freedom that's allows us to be who we really are, which is sexual beings.
Yeah. All right. My second question related to everything you're saying, and it builds into, I don't know, it's like a two-part, but we do live in a patriarchal masculine society where both men and women are go, go, go. And as codependents, yeah, I've talked about how giving so much at work led to I don't know if I think I've shared this before on the podcast, but I was so burnt out in that job that my husband did ask me one time. I think like we had planned to have sex, like it was kind of like, yeah, maybe like a sacred Sunday kind of plan. We were both looking forward to it. And I was like, I'm exhausted. Can we go get brunch? And we were in the car and he's like, Marissa, are you attracted to me? I was like, yes, like I'm just so exhausted that I can't. And so, right, both men and women are highly productive in our culture. And I hear you say, it really does take 30, 45 minutes. I'm like, who has that time when they're just cranking out a bunch of errands and tasks? So yeah, like slowing down. And how does that tie into how you help women access their sexual sovereignty?
Well, we need to recognize that it's okay to sort of have that fast, hot sex once in a while. Like that's great, right? Everybody enjoys those moments where it's operating in that way. It's just better if that's the exception versus the rule for most women. And a lot of times, to get into that place where we're available for that quick, hot sex, we're drinking, right? Or we're partying in some way. And that kind of lowers the inhibitions. So a more mature and connected form of sex is a whole body experience. And that includes the mind, because for us, for women, our yoni, which is a Sanskrit word for vagina that means sacred space, is deeply connected to our psychology. We have so many neural connections that go from our brain into our yoni. And so there are certain places that when they're stimulated, it connects into our psychology. So it's like coming into a man's heart, right? And so there are things that we just need to be aware of as it relates to how we inhabit our body and how we bring that time together. So we want to create space for it. We want to treat it like it's special. And all the things that we used to do before we were married, generally speaking, or early in the relationship, if we're not doing those same things, we don't understand the impact that can have on our biology. So for example, when you get ready to go on a date, you spend all this time, usually as women, we spend this time preparing. We bathe, we think very intentionally about our dress, we adorn ourselves, put on our makeup, fix our hair. We do all these things that are cueing us into, okay, we're priming ourselves for this experience we're going to have with a beloved. Then we go somewhere, usually to have an experience. And if we go out for dinner and it's a nice romantic dinner, the lights are low, so our pupils dilate. Well, the body uses dilation of pupils as a cue to be available for sexual experience.
Mm.
So, I mean, we can learn all these things about how our biology works. Touch, we might get our hands held, we might get some kissing and some cuddling on the way home in the car. So that, and there's this sense of having spent time with our beloved, doing something that brings us into a kind of a unified energy field, so that by the time we get to the bed, we're 3/4 or half the way there, right? That is a different experience than it's 5:30. I've closed the computer. I've just been sitting and sedentary all day. Now I get in my car and fight traffic, or I walk from my home office to the kitchen. I have to now create something around food. We eat, we have full tummies, and now somehow we're supposed to go and feel excited about being sexual. There's been no ritual. There's been no preparation. There's been no time of transition. There's been no looking forward to it, a building up of the energy.
It's dread. Like,
It's
oh
dread, right?
God.
That's how what became for me was like, oh God, it's like a chore. And let me tell you, nobody wants to be your chore in the bedroom. So it's far better to create more intentional times where you can have these fuller experiences and really have satisfying interactions, have satisfying sex. And then that builds positive neuroassociations. We've seen in the research they've done with animals and ostensibly with humans, that we know this empirically, when women have enough experiences of bad sex, we literally just, our bodies start to develop this body-based no matter how much our brains and our hearts want to say yes. Over time, we just won't be able to make ourselves do it. We just won't be able to make ourselves do it.
Right, that book by Bessel van der Kolk comes to mind. The body keeps the score. But yeah, like the body, like eventually, like she's not gonna lie. She can't eventually. Yeah, like despite all of our efforts to, pretend, to other reference, to, just put your head down and do it. Just focus and get it over with. Yeah, eventually a body-based no will be the result. Wow. All right. Well, we've talked about, we've sprinkled tools and techniques throughout this time together. I'm curious, other thoughts, Rima, on offering support to women in becoming more sexually sovereign?
Well, I think it starts with becoming curious about your own body. There's a couple of books I can recommend. One is called, let's see, I think it's called The Anatomy. Oh, let me find it. Anatomy of a Woman. I can send you some of this. Maybe you can put these in the show notes.
Yeah.
And so I will come up with like a little list of books that I would recommend that you can put in the show notes. Also, I would recommend, of course, really looking at how you can get professional support if this is something that you need, if you and your partner have really had some challenges to creating the kind of sexual intimacy that you want to have. Having a support group of sisters, women that you can talk frankly with about this. Maybe even creating a little study group would be a great way for people to begin to broach this subject. I will say, if you've heard yourself in this conversation around being primed to get your self-worth through your sexual and romantic relationships, and you feel like you might be a little bit addicted there, I would highly recommend you check out Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. It's a program that will really support you in understanding how to create your own boundaries around that and how to shift out of that energy. Obviously, Codependents Anonymous is a great place for people who identify as a codependent. It's just in that program, the issues that you're going to be discussing will be far and wide, versus in Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, you're really talking primarily about how that shows up in relationship.
Right.
So there's some really, really good resources out there. And I would just say, don't lose hope. This is fixable. It is fixable. And it starts by becoming aware of your own body, becoming the foremost expert on your own body, so that then you have a chance at helping someone else be able to please you, and really working on the part of you that can get comfortable with the idea that you are worthy. You are worthy of being pleased, that it is your birthright to have pleasure in a sexual encounter. And if it takes you knowing this, if this is the one thing that motivates you, is that you are not serving your partner by not being truthful in the bedroom. You're not serving your partner by not having a good time in the bedroom. Ultimately, that's going to come back and bite both of you in the butt. So if you have to use your love for your partner as the way to make yourself look at this issue, then do that. Do that.
Yeah. The foremost expert on your own body. Talk about an antidote to codependency. Well, yeah, thank you so much for coming back. And I sense I'll have to write and share a solo cast to, because just as you're talking, all these stories and experiences are coming to mind to help the listener not feel so lonely. And if people want to hear more from you, or use some of your content, where can they go?
The best place to come is to my website, rimabonario.com. I have some free gifts on my gifts page. And I'll also give you a link to a program that I made some years back called 7 Days to Awaken, Live Life Lusciously. And it's actually a 7-day practice of just like 5 to 7. It's a short little video for actually physically being with your body and exploring touch and sensation. So that would be a good start for anyone. And then I'll give you that link to the relationship rescue package, which has a set of 4 different videos about how you can create safety in your relationships and create greater harmony in your relationships through conscious communication, and how to be in the cycle of reconciliation, as well as becoming a good receiver. So all that will be available. I do, personal and private one-on-one coaching. If anybody's feeling like they would really like to get some support with this, they can always book me for a coaching session, or they could get a package of 3. Those are available in my shop on the website. And I also have longer term mentoring packages if somebody feels like they'd like to have a longer term experience with me. This is an area of my work that's really just beginning to unfold. I haven't created any group programs around this yet, but I know it's coming, because there's so many of us out here that need this support, that have felt alone and have felt as though we were broken, that there's something wrong with us, and we just aren't doing it right. We don't know how to be the woman in the movies or the woman in the porno, like that's, and we think that's what we're supposed to be.
Right.
And so, it's very, very painful. And I just know that as I was going through it, it really, really helps to have support.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Rima. I'll put links to all of that in the show notes. And I really appreciate you coming back to talk about this. And I'm sure the listeners do too. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me back.
Okay, everybody. We'll see you next week. Hey, girl. It's Marissa again. I'm not like a regular podcaster. I'm a cool podcaster, right? Thank you for listening and staying till the end. You can find me on Instagram at Therapy with Marissa. Email me, marissa@codependummy.com. Check out codependummy.com for more information on the show. And baby girl, a subscribe, rating, and review would be much appreciated. Till next time, I want you to remember, if you are feeling unseen, I see you. If you are feeling unheard, I hear you. And if you think that you don't matter, know that you matter to me. I want you to go out there so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. And now, the disclaimer. Girl, this is not therapy and I am not your therapist. This podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regards to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, publisher, or guests are rendering any legal, clinical, or other professional service. If you want or need a professional, please